Welcome in to the PFF podcast. It is your big-time Throwcast edition. Steve Palazzolo here, along with Zac Robinson, doing, as we always do, breaking down all of the top quarterbacks from the past week, from Jimmy G to Alex Smith. We'll go rapid-fire through some other interesting names as well. But Zac, how was your Christmas, man?
It was great. It was great. Had a little adventure. Got stuck up in the mountains on a snow blizzard, so that was good. But other than that, man, it was a good time.
Awesome. Yeah, that's the challenge, the risk of being out in Denver, right? Just
we thought we were just gonna go for a nice day trip, and ended up 5 feet of visibility on the highways, and they shut it down. So we ended up having to stay at a person's house. I mean, it was a pretty wild time, but yeah, that's the risk that you get going up in the mountains, man.
Oh man, well, glad that it all worked out for you. And we were all working. We were all working Christmas Eve and into Christmas, grading games and reviewing them. And one of the stories of the weekend, Sam and I touched on it a little bit in the review podcast, but it's Jimmy G, Garoppolo against the Jacksonville defense. And for weeks I've been saying, man, I really want to see this Jacksonville defense against New England and that passing offense and what they're able to do as far as scheming and how they're going to handle the pressure. And, this was just as good. Watching San Francisco attack this Jacksonville defense, which the word suffocating has been coming to mind when you talk about what the Jags can do defensively, right? As far as pressuring the quarterback, covering on the back end. Big picture, how did the 49ers have so much success against this Jags defense that's been so good all season?
Yeah, they did a great job just mixing up the personnels, as Sam Monson pointed out early in the week. They led their personnel groupings was 21 personnel, so they stayed in a pro set, 2 fullback and a halfback, 1 tight end, and 2 receivers. That was their leading personnel in the week, and then they did a good job of just completely spreading them out when they were in 11. They did a lot of empty formations and just tried to get them spread out across the board. So like you said, they couldn't just suffocate the middle and push the pocket, and tried to clear up the picture a little bit for Jimmy G.
I loved some of the schemes that San Francisco did pull out. We were watching plays just before we got on here, and you could see them moving one linebacker as they, ran a dig route right behind him. And, they just knew how to essentially manipulate where the Jags were going. The bigger issue, though, is trying to do that as quickly as you can because of the pressure. I mentioned on the review pod, the Jags are number 3 in the league at creating multiple pressures on the same play, multiple players getting pressure on the same play, and they get after you quickly. Everybody talks about Garoppolo and this quick release and this quick mind. I think that's been the story for him so far. Just unbelievable how quickly he can get rid of the ball. We've seen it every week, too. With guys bearing down on him, he's still getting passes off. Have you seen anything like this? Is that comparable to anybody? It's a unique part of his game.
It is, man. His processing ability and quick-mindedness is like a Drew Brees, and how they can get from one read to the next seamlessly, and then as soon as they see that guy pop open, the ball's out of his hand. And we saw him work back on quick game. Even he eliminated one guy and then came back and fired a slant. You just don't see that stuff very much with the release quickness and all that stuff. So he's playing some incredible football. I mean, we've been a big fan of him since we saw him last year take the field in those first 2 games. But his footwork and those things, it's like a mix of Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, how he is always on balance, always in that position so that he can use that quick release and stay accurate with every throw.
Sometimes rocking that Rodgers-like jump throw, right? That's part of that.
He loves it. Yeah, he's doing it. I mean, about 50% of the time, whether he's playing on the move or in the pocket, he's throwing with both feet up in the air, and it helps, like you said, with the quickness of the release even.
Let's break it down a little bit from a PFF standpoint. Right now, he is number 7 in PFF overall grades at 84.9. And the way the grading works, it's really difficult to just jump right up into the 90s. You have to kind of build it up and build up your sample and have sustained success to get up into that high 80s and into the 90s. So even the fact that he's at 84.9 speaks volumes about how well he has played. We're on the site right now. Zach and I do our weekly quarterback rankings sorted by PFF grade, but we do a little write-up about a bunch of the guys and break them down. You can see passer rating in all these different situations. Currently number 1 in passer rating on short passes, 115.7, but number 24 on deep passes, 61. This is the story to me. In deep PFF terms, we grade every play, 0.5, +1, +1.5. Same thing on the negative side. Garoppolo is right now number 1 in positively graded throws, but he's dead last in big-time throw percentage, meaning he's making all of those 0.5 throws. He's making those move the chains passes, finding the open man, throwing guys open at the short and intermediate level, but he's not making those big-time throws. I think it's just this fascinating breakdown because it takes a ton of throws, right, to sustain offense and continue to move the chains, but it also shows how well he's just running that Kyle Shanahan offense.
Yeah, no, it does. And that's, we've talked about just in terms of arm talent, what is his top end arm talent to push the ball down the field and make those tight throws that the best guys do. And if he can continue to, he's so athletic and so instinctive moving around in the pocket that he kind of, a 3rd and 3, he takes off for a gain of 5, extending the play. Those are the type of plays that he's going to have to do just over and over and over. And then I think in terms of the big time throws, he's going to need a little scheme help. Play action. Kyle Shanahan's system is very good at getting throws down the field where you can get a couple yards of separation. So I think it's going to need for those deep shots to come in. Right now he's 3 for 14, 114 yards on deep throws since he took over. So he's only hit 3 throws over 20 yards. So he may need a little scheme help, as they get this thing going and into next year on, pushing the ball down the field where they can flip the field and not have to just, completely sustain drives over and over, picking up a bunch of first downs.
Yeah, I like it. It's still a small sample size for Garoppolo, but again, having that high of a percentage of positively graded throws while avoiding the negatively graded throws, both turnover worthy and just pure misses. He's doing a fantastic job on that end. Have to see where those big time throws do come in though, because those are the passes, downfield passes, tighter windows, they flip the field. And again, I still think there's this cat and mouse game that's going to be happening as we get into next year. How are teams going to attack Garoppolo, perhaps taking away the middle of the field, taking away the short stuff, has to show that he can, get the ball outside the numbers. But I think that's where Shanahan comes in, Zach. All of that bootleg stuff that they do, that's the stuff that opens up the outside the numbers throws. And Garoppolo's so good at the boot stuff. He's good at reading out plays, and he's good at extending plays. And that's kind of that's what makes him dangerous, right? The fact that he can kind of win in multiple ways within that system.
No, you look at how you're trying to stop and defend this guy mixed with Kyle Shanahan, and it's a match made in heaven from a schematic standpoint and offensively what they can do. If they can just, obviously they need some playmakers on the outside to really get some stuff going. But you looked at how Jacksonville played, and they played only 3 snaps of man-to-man coverage. We've seen them over the year just suffocate in man coverage. And for whatever reason, they felt that they could not play as much man-to-man coverage. And, Garoppolo took advantage of all those 3 deep zones.
Yeah, he's been outstanding throwing against zone. So, again, I'm looking forward to just next season. Shanahan's a great play caller. Garoppolo looks like a perfect fit for that system. The next step being, all right, where does the downfield passing game come into account? Only 3 for 14 on those 20-plus yard throws so far. And how do defenses attack them going forward? That's going to be fun to watch as the NFC West between San Francisco rolling right now, the Rams emerging this year, and Seattle, like I said, the last couple weeks, they're not done. So it's going to be a fun division as we move forward. I want to discuss Alex Smith a little bit. Kansas City Chiefs, a guy who all season, my story for Alex Smith, he's playing well, but he gets inflated with the stats. They've got these shovel passes. He's got 6 touchdowns on passes thrown behind the line of scrimmage. Had that crazy Tyreek Hill play at the end of the half against the Cowboys where he just gave him a free touchdown. So he's got these free stats, but this was the opposite in this game. Smith made some nice plays, one of which should have been a 65-yard touchdown up the seam to Albert Wilson that was dropped. Had another touchdown taken away from him, Tyreek Hill along the sideline. So statistically, Alex Smith looked okay. It was about a 90-something passer rating, but one of his better games of the season, I'd say, for a guy that went through that midseason lull.
I agree, man. The deep shots were all right on the money. I mean, he had numerous big time throws down the field. I think it was 3 or 4 total. But yeah, the throw down the seam to Wilson, that thing was right on the money. They did well in play action. His deep shots, the whole season have been good. There was that lull kind of in the middle. The last 4 weeks, he's 11 for 20, 481 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks on throws traveling 20 plus. So he definitely hit that lull in the season where the pressure numbers and all those things dropped, and it wasn't as consistent down the field. But he's definitely picked that up, and this game was it might have been his, from a downfield accuracy and putting it right in stride, it may have been his best game.
Yeah, also had a deep crossing route to Travis Kelce that was really well thrown and dropped as well. So Alex Smith, I mentioned this to Sam on the other pod. If we're just looking at this big picture and forget about the fact that he started out so hot for the first 6 or 7 weeks, and then for a few weeks graded as, he ranked among the 30th. He was about 30th in the NFL among quarterbacks. If you look at the season big picture and you came into the year and you said, look, he's going to have his highest PFF grade of his career at 85.9. He'll be leading the league in passer rating right now heading into week 17, and he'll be the most on-point deep passer in the NFL. While still taking care of the ball. He's still one of the best in the NFL at avoiding turnover-worthy plays. He is currently number 4, actually 3, tied with Garoppolo at avoiding turnover-worthy plays. If I said this before the season, you would take it, right? This is what we wanted to see from Alex Smith, big picture.
Yeah, no kidding. And you might have went into draft season not thinking about taking Patrick Mahomes if you would have seen this type of Alex Smith, but it's been incredible just the way he's flipped his mind to be more aggressive and take these deep shots. I think, schematically they do help him out. They've got a great screen game. They've so much misdirection in their play action game. They've got, guys going in jet motion all over the place. And so in terms of a, scheme fit for him and getting those throws down the field, a clear picture for him where it's not having to force tight throws all the time. It's been great since Matt Nagy took over the last 4 weeks. Man, that they've just been rolling offensively. Everything's just clicking. So he's getting some help from the guys around him. But gosh, you got to give him a ton of credit for hitting all these throws.
The other part too, they've schemed up a lot of the downfield throws, of all the throws really. The scheme's been fantastic. But I do like the fact that if Tyreek Hill is on an island, they're taking that shot. You just can't call one coverage that doesn't account for Tyreek Hill, it seems, right? Where in the past, you could probably, crowd the middle of the field and, threaten or dare Smith to throw the ball down the field. Now, if you dare him, he's taking it, and you have a guy that you can't cover because he's just faster than everybody. And Smith's just like, I can throw the ball as far as I can. He'll run under it, and it's an 80-yard touchdown.
The first play of the season, the preseason, the Chiefs threw a go ball to Tyreek Hill on the right side, and that has been a consistent theme throughout the whole year. He's hit Tyreek Hill on the right side numerous times on go balls, so that's an added element. Obviously, he's running past guys, but I was just looking at his play action numbers the last 4 weeks since Matt Nagy took over. He's 31 for 39, 5 touchdowns, 143.5 pass rating, leading the NFL. So they are clicking and they got something rolling.
Wow. Yeah, so look, the Chiefs have gone through different phases this year. They looked like the best team in the league. Then they looked like they might not even make the playoffs. They're creeping back toward that top echelon team, especially on offense, these last few weeks. And now they're, from almost not making the playoffs to a dangerous team again on offense. And again, if Alex Smith is playing like this, they certainly have a better shot than they did last year, where it felt like they just said, hey, we're tapped out. Alex Smith just can't do it. We're going to go get Patrick Mahomes. But big picture, Alex Smith absolutely stepped up his game, and can't wait to see what he could do in the playoffs. I want to go rapid fire through a couple different guys, good, bad, indifferent. I want to start with Jameis Winston, who to me just had a very weird game, Zach. Statistically was unbelievable. I wrote him up on our PFF ranking breakdown. 131 passer rating, 21 of 27 for 367, touchdown, no interceptions. it was one of those games where they throw so many downfield passes that he doesn't get a whole lot of after the catch type of help. But in this game, he throws a post route that turns into a 70-yarder by Chris Godwin. He throws a comeback route that turns into a 35-yarder that, passes that don't normally become big explosive plays did due to his playmakers. But his worst plays didn't show up at least in the passing stats, just bad fumbles, taking sacks he shouldn't have taken, and of course a strip sack to end the game before imploding. Just imploded as far as his just screaming and yelling and going crazy. What do you think of Jameis and this roller coaster?
Oh man, it was bizarre. Yeah, the last 2 weeks you've been like, all right, yes, he's getting it. He's playing his best football the last couple of weeks. His under pressure rating the past 4 weeks, 118.8. So he's handling pressure well. He's not forcing too many throws down the field. The pocket fumbles are the issue, but he's such an emotional guy up and down. We talked about last year was, his first quarter stats were just brutal to look at because he's so hyped up and ready to go. And then this game, it was, all the emotion built up, the frustration, I'm sure, from the season, and inexcusable, how he reacted and shoving guys. I don't even know who the guy was that was trying to stop him out there, but definitely a weird game for Jameis and really the whole team as a whole. It's just been an odd year, so we'll see if he can kind of reset next year and take that leap that I think we were all expecting, them as a team to take and him personally, but it just hasn't really worked out that way.
Yeah, the story for Jameis in PFF terms for us, always a high percentage of positively graded throws. He's always throwing the deep out and the deep comeback and the post route, and he's moving the chains, but he also misses a big chunk of those. He's cut down on his negatives a little bit. He's only got the 11th highest percentage of negatively graded throws, but he's still number one in positively graded throws. And he looked good. He threw the ball well. I thought his handling of Carolina's blitz and their pressure schemes, he just knew where to go with the ball. He had a good feel for it. He had that one play, he threw a little wheel route up the sideline. He just kind of
that was nice.
Right?
Yeah.
The pressure. He's got unblocked pressure coming at him. He just kind of rolls a little bit, creates himself some space, loops it out there. He looked as comfortable as I've seen him, purely just throwing the football. But red zone was bad. They couldn't connect in the red zone, and that's when he started to take some sacks, and then again the game-ending sack, and then the implosion. It's just a weird game for Jameis, but that's him, right? This roller coaster ride. How do we settle him down?
I know.
Every year.
Maybe it's just going to come with more maturity, perspective on what he is to the franchise and how all that stuff factors in. But it was a wild roller coaster game for him.
Well, I want to go to Mitch Trubisky. Got to play a little bit in the snow, and when he got drafted to Chicago, we both came up with some questions and said he doesn't always throw the cleanest football, and maybe that's going to be rough in some December weather in Chicago, or when you have to play in some of those NFC North type of places. But looked pretty good, and I love the comparison you make for Trubisky, and it's going to get Bears fans even more excited. You always compare him to who?
Garoppolo. They play the game the same way. If he needs to watch as much Garoppolo film in the offseason and see how he's playing the game, his footwork and cleaning all that stuff up, because how he processes, moves around, can do the boot game that we see so often and throw the ball down the field on that boot game. So, if he can just, he's made some positive strides. It hasn't been a complete disaster for what the team has been and what the offensive, playmaker wise is around him. He's been able to, hang in there with good defense. So this week he was, pretty solid, moved around. The blitz recognition continues to be, which for a lot of rookies it is, but that's, dating back to even college, that was
your scouting report. That was in your scouting report coming out. Blitz recognition is something he needs to improve.
Blitz recognition. He took 4 sacks against the blitz this week, and which, it wasn't good, but also it wasn't bad because he wasn't forcing anything, under duress. But there's a lot to like with him. I think this was a good game to see in a bad weather, and hit some throws, missed some, but overall was pretty solid throughout.
did a nice job in between the numbers, 11 of 13 for 164. When you're comparing him to Garoppolo, you're talking about pretty quick processor and release point, right? Like a quick release and ability to sometimes make those quick releases right under pressure as well, right?
Yeah, yep, exactly. And extending the play, kind of feeling the pocket, how those guys, they both do it in a similar type of way. It's just he's got to clean up just overall footwork, mechanics, and those type of things.
All right, a couple more guys to get through, the good and the bad. Let's discuss Drew Brees on the good side. Again, New Orleans as dangerous as any team in the NFC because they can win in all phases, run game, defense, and of course Drew Brees, still a very good quarterback.
Yeah, this was a great game. He was hitting every throw down the field. I think he had 3 or 4 big-time throws in total. You can throw in the screen game to Kamara, and this is a team that you do not want to see in the playoffs, man. They got everything that they want in their arsenal on offense, so it's going to be a fun team to watch.
There are some comparisons between Brees and Alex Smith this year, believe it or not. If you look at the fact that the screen game, such a weapon for both teams. You mentioned Kamara, his work after the catch. Drew Brees is leading the league in percentage of his yards that have come after the catch. So he's certainly had some help from his playmakers, specifically Kamara and all those screens. But at the same time, he's also number 2, right behind Alex Smith, in adjusted completion percentage on those deep passes, those 20-plus yard passes. He's not attempting a ton, only 11.1%. That is 27th in the NFL. But again, I think despite some throws this year, Zach, where we've said, where's his arm strength? Is it really there? Just waiting for that drop-off. He's still shown that he's got the anticipation, the accuracy to get the ball down the field for the most part. He'll leave a few short, but still doing it as well as anybody in the league.
Absolutely, yeah. He's still got – there was a good period there where he was wearing the elbow sleeve, and we were kind of questioning that, and then the throwing down the field. It seemed those weeks they were throwing a ton of screens, the Bills game, and those where they were kind of trying to hide maybe some of that stuff. But he looks like he's completely healthy now and hitting throws down the field that they need.
All right, on the bad side, last week we talked about Nick Foles a little bit. We talked about him the last couple weeks. Maybe the Eagles are going to be okay, and he had a decent game last week against the Giants. Excellent red zone, tight area accuracy, but this was opposite end of the spectrum on Monday night against the Raiders.
Yeah, it was brutal. I mean, everybody that watched the game could see how bad he was struggling, just didn't play decisive at all. You look at his, statistically and throws longer than 2.6 seconds. He ended up last passer rating during the week this week, 14.6 passer rating. He went 5 for 16 with an interception. So he was, he had a dropped interception. I could have gone back the other way. Just
left one way behind on the out route. Reggie Nelson had an easy pick 6 opportunity. Yeah,
he just, just was not processing stuff. The checkdowns were sitting right there in front of him. Sometimes he could have got the ball out of his hand, and he decided to try to extend it and make something happen, and the throws just weren't there. I mean, he's going to miss his share of throws. He's a backup quarterback. We can't expect him to be as pinpoint as he was in the red zone last week, but the throws he's got to hit, the timing and all those type of routes just were not there consistently.
Yeah, for the Eagles, on one hand, it's encouraging. They're still able to win the game because they do have an excellent roster on both sides of the ball, but Foles will have to play better come playoff time. Last one I want to touch on the bad side, Dak Prescott also made a comment. Des Bryant drops a pass that gets tipped up for an interception. Talked about this with with Sam on the other podcast. I thought it was just a quarterback saying, I got to do better. I got to hit him in the face mask. I need to make a better throw. And you guys all think he's throwing a little bit of shade at Des Bryant. He said, essentially, I need to hit him in the face mask instead of, a little bit behind him where he could drop it and lead to the interception. What'd you make out of those comments from Dak?
I think it was just a lot of built-up frustration between, those two guys' lack of chemistry throughout the whole year. And I did think it was a little bit of a shot at him. On that route that Dez was running, he was kind of on a spot route over the middle, and typically you got to, give a guy a clear indicator of where you're sitting down. And Dez was he was moving around and drifting, and then the throw ended up wide off his hands. Everybody saw the play, but I do think it was just a frustration type thing that they haven't been able to connect, and it's been just such a weird game. Their offense in general looks very stale. The concepts and all those things, they just have not been able to get the big plays down the field with Dez that they need to do.
Yeah, look, I think it's been a fascinating study watching Dak these last couple years. Certainly looks a lot more like a fourth-round pick this year. Last year he looked like the steal of the century. And, it shows just how important the supporting cast is and the scheme and just everything else around him. So Dak will be another fascinating off-season study as we head into next season. All right, guys, before I bring Sam in for our mailbag portion of the show, a quick break to remind you that this episode is brought to you by PredictionMachine.com. Prediction Machine, a new generation in sports analytics where they play the games 50,000 times before they're actually played. Make better picks with proven data-driven analysis. Subscribe at PredictionMachine.com today and earn a $5 credit that can be used towards the purchase of any package. All right, Sam, welcome in. Mailbag time.
Thank you, Steve. It is mailbag time.
We've downgraded after the hard-hitting analysis of Zach and breaking down the quarterbacks. You'll have to do, but we got a few questions here today.
You say downgrading. I say we are kicking this analysis into high gear. This is where we really start to talk about the issues that matter.
All right, let's kick it up a notch. Are you feeling any better from yesterday? We both kind of trudged through our sick-laden podcast.
A little bit. I think I'm on the mend, but still, hip deep in the middle of this cold, which I'm pretty sure you were the carrier of, by the way. You seem to have infected the whole PFF office.
Spread it around the whole office. I brought my kids into the office one day. They were carrying it too, just to make sure that it got full coverage. It was a pretty good plan by me, and then I bailed.
Yes.
Bailed to New England for a few weeks. All right, let's do it. We've got a question. Are we hitting this first one here? Or no?
Yeah.
All right. Fill in the blank. An NFL team's season, regular season and or playoffs, will hinge on the backup quarterback's performance in blank % of seasons, and as such, a backup quarterback is worth a blank round draft pick. That is from Matt in Wisconsin. Sam, do you have an answer for this? What do you think?
Well, the problem is it's a case of how good that team was to begin with. So the number of times where I think the difference between them potentially winning a Super Bowl and not is the backup quarterback, I think is minimal. As for how many times teams are actually forced to go to the backup quarterback over the course of the season, obviously that's a much higher number. Right. And there's usually a few teams each season. But how many of those were ever actually in a position to contend in the first place? And the difference being that backup quarterback, I think, is a pretty low number.
Yeah, especially when you're talking about how much is that backup being relied upon. We're talking about Nick Foles completely taking over for the Philadelphia Eagles and being the guy during the playoffs, much like Matt McGloin had to last year for the Oakland Raiders over Derek Carr. And that's different from, say, Ben Roethlisberger missing a game or two during the season where Landry Jones has to come in.
Yeah.
So I put an arbitrary number to it, 20%. 20%. Yeah, 20% of playoff teams maybe have to tap into their backup. I mean, look at this year. Case Keenum in Minnesota, technically not your starter.
Well, I think that's a good example because that is a case where the season is genuinely hinging on the backup quarterback. And the same as Philadelphia, actually, because they are now stuck with Nick Foles for the rest of the season. Both those seasons are going to hinge on the play of their backup quarterback. But, a team whose season or who just had to get by through a couple of games with their backup is not in the same boat, I don't think.
It's also the second year in a row for Minnesota.
Yeah,
essentially.
Well, that's because their starter is Sam Bradford.
Well, last year Sam Bradford was the guy they brought in. It wasn't necessarily the backup. They brought him in to replace Teddy Bridgewater.
Yeah, but now anytime Sam Bradford is your starter, you're guaranteed to have to go to the backup at some point.
Oh, that percentage goes up to about 80%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Not 20%. So we gave some estimates there.
How much is that worth is the other part of that.
Well, maybe the Kirk Cousins example's a good one. He was a fourth-round pick, and if you can grab a fourth-round pick that not only becomes a good backup but also becomes a quality starter and one that you're going to pay millions and millions of dollars while deciding if you should pay him more millions of dollars, that's pretty good value there, I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of attitude to it because one of the quotes, or the quote in my pinned tweet on Twitter, is from Tom Moore, who was, when he was asked why Peyton Manning's backups didn't get more reps in practice, back in Peyton Manning's heyday with the Indianapolis Colts, he replied simply, fellas, if 18 goes down, we're going to need the bleep soundtrack here, Taylor. If 18 goes down, we're and we don't practice. And honestly, there's a lot to that. Most teams in the NFL, if they have a franchise quarterback, if that franchise quarterback goes down, they are screwed. And no amount of good backup is going to fix that. Like, you need to be so good everywhere else that if to win the Super Bowl with a backup, you need to be so good with the rest of that roster. And almost all teams that have an elite quarterback are not in the same situation where they have an elite roster as well. You either have one or the other. So in a funny way, I almost think that you're never going to be in a situation where you have both a top quarterback and a top backup that can actually win you the ring if that first guy goes down, to the point where it's ever worth anything. I'm almost of the opinion, I kind of agree with them, with Tom Moore and the way the Colts did it, which is you ride that one guy, you put all your resources into him, and it doesn't matter who your backup is, because if that guy goes down, the season's gone. Like, they rolled for years with, Jim Sorgi as their backup quarterback, purely on the basis that he would never have to see the field for more than like 5 snaps at a time. And if they did, that game was probably gone.
And that's why they hardly, could barely win a game in 2011 when Peyton went down, and you've got Curtis Painter, Dan Orlovsky starting games for the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, there's more at stake when it comes to backup quarterbacks too, because we always talk about, hey, just draft a quarterback every year, keep the pipeline going, and this is for most teams, right? Always have that next guy, always try to develop that next guy. You either never know when you're going to stumble into one that you could keep or stumble into one that you can trade. So there's other value besides this season right now and what they're going to bring. So I'm more of the minds that you just continue the open door in the quarterback room, bring more guys in. I mean, even if it's, New England brings in Garoppolo, and we might look back and say they only got a second-round pick for him, but at the same time, they got a quarterback that they realized was pretty good. They couldn't pay him, and they got a draft pick for him. So continue to develop backup quarterbacks and churn them out. Yeah,
I mean, I would always try and find a quarterback in the draft purely because of the value it would be worth, not necessarily because of what it could do for me if my starter goes down, but because I can potentially flip that guy for a first-round pick somewhere down the line.
All right, we got a question about historical context of Matt Ryan's season this year. I don't have the historical numbers right now. I can give you the numbers for this season as to what is happening with Matt Ryan and his interception total. So this past Sunday, he had the, what we call it, the butt pick.
The butt pick.
From Marshawn Lattimore, his 12th interception for the season. And Matt Ryan has had interceptions on many, many tipped passes from his receivers. We've seen a butt pick on a pass that was perfectly well thrown. We've seen bad routes or miscommunications on routes where it wasn't really Ryan's fault. He's trying to throw a timing route. The receiver runs a different route. It ends up as an interception. So he's had some really bad interception luck. 12 interceptions, but only 6 turnover-worthy plays. Now, some of those turnover-worthy plays also didn't get picked, but essentially 6 turnover-worthy plays, but 12 interceptions is horribly bad luck. And we will make it a point this offseason to run the numbers on all seasons in the PFF database and give better historical context. I will tell you this right now, though. For a guy that's leading the league in avoiding turnover-worthy plays from a percentage standpoint, and the fact that Ryan is tied for 8th in the NFL with those 12 interceptions, it is some pretty horrible luck from an interception standpoint this year for Matt Ryan.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive numbers.
And I'll come back to, look, he's not playing as well as he did last year, but it's also not a far cry off from normal Matt Ryan standards, which year over year is very good. It's top of the league. And, statistically, 91.4 passer rating is, so it's good until you put in, it's 17th in the NFL. So he should be better than that. Statistically should be better than that. and the interception luck, or the poor interception luck, a huge factor.
And I think he's
in
had a
that.
stretch this year where he was playing as well as last season. It just hasn't happened for the entire season. You know, he had a rough
Right.
start. He had a hiccup or two in against Minnesota, and then that first New Orleans game. But for a good sort of 5, 6, 7 game stretch, he was, I think, every bit as good as a year ago.
Yeah, and with Ryan, here's the thing. 2015 statistically wasn't great. This year statistically is just okay. Those seasons aren't drastically worse than last season where he was statistically off the charts. That's to me that's like the bigger takeaway. If you look at 2015, 16 and 17 throw for throw, it's a lot closer than say the numbers would appear.
Yeah, well, it was
Go
our
ahead.
interesting point that we made was that 2016 was the Matt Ryan career year, but it's actually not the highest grade he's ever achieved at PFF. 2012, he had a slightly higher overall grade.
Yep, he did. All right, we have a question about Jimmy G. It's greetings from Brazil once again. It's a long question. I will paraphrase it essentially from Anderson Werner here. He's basically asking, what are the positives and negatives for the 49ers and they're starting Jimmy Garoppolo this weekend? So one more game in the regular season. They're playing the Rams. The Rams have already basically said they're going to come out and probably rest a lot of their players because they're locked into their seeding when it comes to the playoffs. And so what are the positives and negatives to starting Garoppolo or benching him or letting CJ Beathard play and essentially giving yourself a lower percentage chance of winning?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, do you try and tank for that better draft pick or better draft status? And honestly, there isn't an awful lot to be gained by playing him. I think everybody is already pretty convinced that this guy is legit. They're not going to let him leave. You know, whatever happens in the offseason, whether it's they get him tied down to a long-term contract or he gets franchised there, he's going to be playing in San Francisco next season. And whatever happens in week 17, other than the fact that he could potentially get a catastrophic injury, I guess, isn't going to change that. You know, he is their starting quarterback, I think, going forward. So, yeah, there isn't actually an awful lot to be gained by playing him. And you could potentially damage your draft status.
So Anderson did give us some positives and negatives that he came up with. Some of the positives: motivating free agents to sign with a trending team. A little bit of, you're playing a tough game against a playoff team like the Rams, like they have played these last few weeks against the Jags and the Titans, and just kind of getting that experience, evaluating the performances of your other offensive players next to Garoppolo rather than with CJ Beathard, who's not the future at the position. And of course, the negatives are as obvious as you said. It's draft status, losing that extra slot or 2 or 6 or whatever it might be in the draft process, and perhaps putting a little bit more footage of Garoppolo in the system for opposing defensive coordinators. Anything hit home for you there? I think there's something too. Finishing on a positive note, trending upward, making it this attractive place for the 49ers, rallying around Garoppolo and building a team there.
I think they've already done that, though. I think this past week against the Jags was big in that regard. They really took it to a team that was that is a playoff side that is looking or was looking formidable heading into the playoffs. The 49ers stomped them. I think if you just button it up right now and said, right, we're sitting Jimmy G down, we're the season's done, we're ending on a high. The Rams are mailing it in as well, so it's just a completely meaningless bowl for everybody. I think everybody still recognizes that everything is in the right direction there in the 49ers. Things are looking up because Jimmy G looks so good in the games he did play. I don't think you'd be risking the idea that suddenly the reputation of what this franchise is going to go down because you did that. I think it's still going to be an attractive place. People will recognize Garoppolo is good. He is going to take that team in the right direction. Like we said in the last podcast, they could legitimately have been a playoff team this year if they'd had him starting all the way through the season with one of the worst rosters in the league, the way they've played the past few weeks. So I don't think you're risking that.
No, I'm kind of with you there, Sam. I think they've already established themselves as a team on the rise. We talked quite a bit right after the draft that they had one of the best drafts that we've seen. Solomon Thomas, Reuben Foster has already stepped in and become awesome. Akello Witherspoon at cornerback has already looked good. George Kittle, fifth round tight end who we loved coming out, Trent Taylor. All of those guys have been contributors. And then, of course, what Garoppolo has brought. So I think they're already trending up. Maybe I'd lean a little bit more toward the draft pick at this time. Sit them, get a little bit better draft pick, keep loading up on that roster. All right, quick question from Aaron from Maryland. He's basically saying, which players have looked good in the grading? They're grading well, but there's this next level that they can reach, whether it's because of system or scheme or not having enough snaps, whatever it might be. Anything on that, Sam?
Yeah, I think there's a few guys that have been grading well that could potentially become elite players going forward. I think Hunter Henry, tight end for the Los Angeles Chargers, now that he is essentially replacing Antonio Gates, I mean, he's got some excellent grades this season, but the production is not massive. He's got less than 600 receiving yards, only 4 receiving touchdowns, but he is graded fantastically, both as a receiver and as a run blocker, which is really, I think it's a big underrated thing for tight ends. What can really differentiate those guys is if you are able to run block well and be a big part of that offense in that way, because that's one of the reasons Rob Gronkowski is so phenomenal, is that he is also an excellent run blocker for the Patriots, not just one of the toughest matchup weapons you're going to see. So, Hunter Henry doesn't quite have the grade that Gronk has. He's like 5.6 grading points behind, but he could potentially become the next elite tight end from what we've seen if they lean on him as the prime weapon there. And then the other guy whose name leapt to mind was Ryan Ramczyk, the rookie tackle for the New Orleans Saints. Again, he's been grading pretty damn well right off the bat, and if there's growth there, development there, he could become one of the better right tackles in the league at a position that's become premium now with all these
absolutely
pass rushers.
Love those right tackles. They're extremely valuable. A couple other names to watch. Just mentioned him, Reuben Foster. He's played under 500 snaps, but is already grading among the best linebackers in the entire league. So it's one of those, if you doubled his snaps, if he had played a full season, he's up in that 90-plus range, and he's already an elite linebacker most likely. Your boy Kenyon Drake with Miami has really come on strong here in the second half. Number 2 in the league in elusive rating, 101.7. I think he's a guy, you give him more touches, and he becomes a guy down the stretch. And Alex Collins with Baltimore, we've already talked about him on the show. I don't know if he's already there. I don't know if he's a future star, but he's a future solid player who's already grading well, forcing missed tackles, running hard, and becoming a guy for Baltimore when they just needed somebody to run the ball efficiently, and that's what he's doing.
Yep.
All right, good question. Was this a separate question here, Sam?
Which one?
Who were some players grading far better than their surrounding teammates?
Oh, yeah.
I.e. Landon Collins versus the rest of the Giants.
Yeah, Landon Collins, while the rest of the Giants is terrible.
I didn't prep for this one. I'll give you an interesting one though. If you look at Houston and their offense and what Deshaun Watson was able to do minus his Week 1 disastrous relief appearance against the Jaguars, Deshaun Watson, perhaps his whole rookie season is even more impressive when you look at just how bad his supporting cast is outside of DeAndre Hopkins. So Hopkins is one name. He is grading unbelievably on this Houston offense that right now has the lowest cumulative grade in our PFF system. And then Watson was grading well. He was grading solid and on his way, I think, to improving his grade among a terrible offensive line, questionable receivers beyond Hopkins, little run game to speak of, just a team that didn't have a ton of talent, and Watson made them look good. And once he disappeared, they became quite irrelevant with Tom Savage or TJ Yates running the show.
Yeah, I think Joe Bitonio, the guard for Cleveland Browns, we were expecting that offensive line to be a really good unit this season. And as soon as, it never really panned out that way, but as soon as Joe Thomas went down, really Bitonio was the only standout on that offensive line. He's had probably a career year for him, and nobody else has quite risen to the same kind of level. And obviously Khalil Mack is perpetually toiling in Oakland while being the lone star there when nobody else can quite match it. Certainly not as a pass rushing force. There's been some guys there that actually have made some kind of impact in the run game. But yeah, Mack is usually the one guy there that's playing head and shoulders above anybody else.
I'll add one more to the mix. We talked about them recently, but the Bucs on defense, it's not every year, but many years it seems like it's just Gerald McCoy and Levante David grading well. And it just looks like you've got these two foundation pieces to build around, and they just have never been able to do that. Brent Grimes is still pretty good in the back end, but he's okay. Robert Ayers has come in and played pretty well, but beyond that, there's really not a whole lot on Tampa Bay's side that's grading well beyond those two guys that have, they're often. Levante David's kind of been like an off and on superstar, but his top end play in his career has been, top 3 linebacker type of play for a couple of years of his career. So
also a little shout out to Duke Johnson, running back / wide receiver for the Cleveland Browns, voted by their players as the team's MVP, which kind of tells you everything, given that he has less than 550 snaps to his name this season, has never carried the ball more than 10 times over the course of the year, and even in terms of receiving I don't think has a 100-yard game to a season. So they've really, he has been, I think, their best offensive player, but they haven't used him in a way you would expect the team to use their MVP. I load him up with as much touches as you can possibly get him.
All right, let's finish up with this one kind of fun question. Andrew on Twitter at Andy Carrier, or at ND Carrier, because the at acts as the A in his handle. There,
sneaky.
Guys, just so you know. Could Sean McVay be a starting quarterback in the NFL? He already calls audibles for Jared Goff, so assuming he could throw semi-competently, he could be pretty good.
Yeah,
Sam?
I like that. Given that he's doing all the work anyway, could he just get out there and play quarterback himself because he knows where to go with the ball the whole time?
Those who can't teach, though, Sam. Those who can't teach.
Really? But he's not so much teaching as doing it himself. He's not teaching Goff how to do it. He's in the headset saying, call this audible now.
I don't think it's as cut and dry.
Get there before 15 seconds expires, because otherwise I can't fix it for you.
It is not. Look, that is not a completely unique story to the Rams. There was actually a Boston Globe article a couple years ago about, Brady likes to get to the line quickly too, so McDaniels can stay in his ear until that 15-second mark. I'm sure other quarterbacks do it as well. I don't think he's calling every single audible, but look, every single coach knows the right audible to call, right? They taught the quarterback how to do it. Every coach knows the right audibles to call. So I don't know. Should Wade Phillips be playing defense if he could run a little bit because he knows the right play calls?
I think that's asking a little bit more. What we're asking for here, though, we're looking at the puppet master. Can the puppet master step in and run the thing himself? Probably not, right?
I don't think so. As easy as the throws are that McVay creates for his quarterbacks, and he does as good of a job as any at creating open throws and making it look easy, it's not that easy that the quarterback, that the coach could just step in and be quarterback. So I'd say no.
Yeah, there's some pretty tricky throws in there anyway.
Well, I liked it. It was a pretty fun question anyway. So we'll wrap it up on that. Thanks again, guys, for all of your questions and everything you guys contribute to the show. We've had a lot of fun doing the mailbag edition. Thanks for listening to the quarterback breakdown as well. We'll be back. Our next show is going to be Week 17 preview. We'll get into all the playoff scenarios, what it all means, and break it all down for you guys. Again, don't forget to get to profootballfocus.com, PFF Elite, PFF Edge. That is your avenue into our deep database, our world of goodies, and a lot of great stuff coming up soon for our subscribers in the month of January. Stay tuned for that. Thanks again, guys. We'll talk this weekend, or later this week, for the preview.